My name is Darlene Rondo, and I'm the Vice President Best Practices for Leonardo's online merchandising group, and I'm going to be your host for today's event. Welcome to everyone who's joining us today, and to those for whom it is the middle of the night, and I see that some of you have called in from all over the world, a special thank you. A few housekeeping items before we begin. First, we're going to be recording today's event, and we'll be sending you a thank you for joining us email with a link to that recording and slides. You also have a questions dialog box in your GoToMeeting panel, and we'd like to invite you to send in your questions throughout the webinar as well as at the end of the event, and we'll address them throughout. And if there's time at the end, we'll also keep some questions for them. So please locate that questions dialog box because we're going to be asking you questions throughout the next 45 minutes. And today's webinar is designed to be practical and really interactive. So I encourage you to send in your questions and comments to both Greg and I. We're going to be tweeting during today's discussion as well, so you can join in the conversation at #LeoWebinar. And now I'd like to introduce our special guest for today's discussion. Greg Bodner is a passionate hospitality marketer and HSMAI leader. He's based in Boston, Massachusetts, and he has a really keen interest in digital trends, social media, and innovation with over 6 years of hotel and technology experience. Greg is currently the area marketing manager at the Kimpton Hotels of Boston and Cambridge, and prior to this, he served as brand marketing manager for the Charles Hotel in Cambridge. He's also held digital marketing roles at Fairmont Southampton, Bermuda, which I'm super jealous about, the Mark Hotel in New York City, the Westin Copley Place in Boston, and the SaaS technology company, Revinate. Greg graduated from Cornell and has been featured as a hotel marketing expert on NPR, National Public Radio, hotelmarketing.com, and is the VP of Membership Experience for HSMAI. And truly, there is no one more suited or qualified to speak on today's topic about social media than Greg. So welcome, Greg. Glad you could join us.
Thanks for welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. So as we often do, everybody, we like to start our webinars out with a poll. And the first poll we want to check in with everybody about is, where are you located? So just click the radio box that most closely corresponds to where you are. Are you in North America? Are you in EMEA? Are you in Asia Pacific? Or are you in Latin America? And then just hit the submit button. And we will tally the results. And let's see, 80% of you have voted, so I'm going to close the poll, and 75% are in North America, 17% in Europe, Middle East, Africa, 3% in Asia Pacific, and 8% in Latin America. So thanks, everybody. Really appreciate you weighing in on that. I'm going to do another poll as well. And this poll is going to ask the question, what social media platforms do you predominantly use? Is it Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, or something else? And if it is something else, if you could just send in what that other thing is in your GoToMeeting panel, the questions dialog box, that would really help us. What this does is it really sets the stage for our conversation today and gives Greg and I some insights into where you're coming from. So wow, 95% are using Facebook, 62% Instagram, followed by Twitter, 41%, and then Pinterest at 16%, and then we have the other category. And then this third poll that we'd like to get your thoughts on is, how would you describe your social media strategy? It's really working great. I'm not seeing the results that I would like. Or the third answer is, I don't have a social media strategy. So please weigh in, and thanks everybody for being so active. This is great. So 45%, I'm not seeing the results I want. 27%, I don't have a strategy, and 26%, it's working great. So yeah, great. Good food for thought for us as we move through this session today. And when I asked what social media platforms you're using, other people wrote in the comments dialog box, people are using LinkedIn, Google Plus, and Snapchat. So thanks everybody, and that's good to know as we move through. So I'm going to set up today's topic, and we're going to start with obviously social media because it's been inspired by you, our audience. This is feedback that you gave us late last year, and it was one of the top topics that you asked us to cover again in 2017. And you want to specifically understand how to use it effectively in your digital marketing mix, and that's really no surprise considering how important it is these days. According to the 2014 Google study, 83% use social media to get inspired as they're planning their travel, and this is especially true for people under 34. Social media is used for research to the point where some people will actually change their plans based on what they're reading. And naturally, posting pictures easily and often not only makes your friends jealous, but also gives them, really helps you in spreading the word about your hotel. And then lastly, don't forget to look for your hotel story inside these postings, because there are lots and lots of valuable insights to be gained through the eyes of your guests. And if you just consider this, if nothing else you remember from today's discussion is, let's say you're a 100-room property and you have a 60% occupancy with 1.5 or so guests a night. That's roughly 31,000 storytellers you could have working for you on an annual basis. So if you consider that almost 40% of adult Facebook users have between 1 and 100 friends, and that's probably where I am. Greg, you're probably up in the 15% with over 500 friends. That does not surprise me. Even the most conservative number of friends, your guests have the potential to connect you with anywhere from 4 to 8 million people on Facebook. Now, granted, this data from Pew is from 2014, but Oxford just a few months ago found that the average number of Facebook friends is 155. So if we do the math, that's still close to 5 million people. And that's just one social media platform. Greg, what are your thoughts on how social impacts the travel shopping journey, and how have you typically used social for the hotels you work for?
Well, where to succinctly start, Darlene? That's a great question. I love that we started with some statistics just to reaffirm the impact of social media, because I think both you and I have talked enthusiastically and very passionately about social media for hotels for quite a number of years now, and social media really has matured as a discipline, and more specifically social media marketing. But the poll earlier, in terms of asking our audience, are you getting the results that you want from social media? It's not that surprising to me to see that over a third of the audience said, no, we're not getting those results, because I think the constant challenge that we all can relate to, whether or not you represent an independent hotel with, say, 50 rooms, or a large branded property, city center that has over 1,000 rooms, we all face the same pressures from the higher up levels of our organization. And that is, where is the ROI? How are my hotels performing from a profit and loss standpoint? And where social media gets into the mix, it's still, even as the space has matured, it's still a tough nut to crack to directly attribute ROI to social media efforts. So, as we have stayed, you and me, Darlene, have seen in the space, we've seen a litany of hotels invest in social media practices 6-7 years ago, and then divest because they weren't seeing that ROI. But the challenge there is that they're not looking at social media in the right way, right? And framing your social media strategy with this slide and this approach that I have here on the screen, as it relates to Google's micro moments, I think is a really great way to think about this whole journey, because at the end of the day, what are your end goals with social media? Really, it's to augment your communications with guests pre, post, and during their stay, but really tell your story about your property and what makes it stand out beyond just the cookie cutter kind of baseline amenities that make a hotel a hotel. At the end of the day, we all work for properties that have 4 walls, have beds in the room, there's a lot of kind of those homogenized, very standard kind of basics that come with the industry. So when you tap into and frame your social media strategy by thinking about Google's micro moments and what they talk about the traveler journey that people look to when they are searching for a travel experience and when they're looking for a hotel to plan a trip, they're thinking about they're buying and dreaming and planning in these micro moments that are defined as such on the screen. So on the left, to go left to right, they plan their travel with when they have these I want to get away moments, when you're dreaming about your stay or your potential trip to your next destination. I know very candidly, January in Boston is not the best time to visit, so I'm already definitely in those I want to get away moments. And that happens every day of my life and every moment when I'm on the traveling to and from work. The time to plan a moment, time to make a plan moment, those are when you move from that dreaming phase into your planning phase and you have a little bit better idea of what you're going to be or what kind of travel experience you want to have. The let's book it moments are when you're more closer to the bottom of the funnel, the path to purchase for a travel experience, where you've done that research, you've consulted different websites. By the way, most of those are social media platforms, and you're more ready to make that booking. And the final piece of this is the can't wait to explore moment. So when you're on property, and I know, Darlene, we're going to talk about user-generated content in a minute, but when your guests are on property, don't think that your job as a social media marketer or as that social media is just a pre- and post-travel deal. Not at all. If anything, it actually is all about capturing those moments that your guests are having on property and broadcasting that out in a real, genuine way to your guests across all platforms, whether using Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, or the other channels that we're talking about. So I think you need to look at this slide first before you even think about crafting a social media strategy, or if you already have one in place, you frame it with these ideas in mind, and how are you appealing to these various parts of the traveler journey in your social media strategy. So how do you do that? I talked a lot about that slide. You have to really two things: be there and be useful with your content. The reality of it is that first, just having a presence on social media is like the very basic step one. It's great to see that so many of the marketers and hoteliers on the call are on Facebook, because as we know, that continues to be the largest social media platform that casts the widest net in terms of audience reach and size. But it's not just being there and posting some content and listening and responding to your guests on occasion. It's committing resources, property resources, whether it's human capital or dollars, to being there and being useful, driving a narrative on social that isn't just overtly self-promotional. It isn't just about getting your next promotional offer out there on Facebook or Instagram, but it's, again, how do you tell that genuine, real story that your guests are experiencing on property? Because that's the only way you're going to be able to capture the right kinds of guests and then drive that right mix of business that then your owners that I was talking about at the very beginning of this call are going to be most concerned about. It, or you're driving the right mix, and that's by being useful on social media. So.
Hey, Greg, before we go to our next slide, Vanessa in the audience has an excellent question that I think is timely based on what you're talking about now. She's asking, how do you overcome or how do you handle managing your social media if you're not on site real time to capture those immediate moments?
That's a really tough question. I mean, it's a really tough challenge that I think a lot of hoteliers face. I think that when we pivot the conversations to user-generated content and being able to harness a lot of the content, meaning photos that our guests are taking at the property, and being able to engage, interact, and ask for permission for their photos, a lot of best effective social media engagement really requires, thanks to Instagram and thanks to the visibility that now we have of our guests' content that is out there on social media, a lot of it requires just asking for permission and repurposing a lot of content that your guests have already individually shared on their own social media networks. So I think that's really where you start to overcome that challenge.
Thanks.
And I think I've already maybe addressed this, but at the end of the day, it's all about, again, being useful. So when you frame your strategy with thinking about Google's micro moments, which, by the way, as an aside, doesn't speak to necessarily only social media strategy. Google talks about the micro moments, again, from the entire buyer journey and all of your digital and overall marketing strategy. So that includes to, thinking about other topics that I know Leonardo has talked about in the past about how effective is your mobile presence and your website optimization. When are you engaging your guests across other marketing channels and leveraging other marketing strategies? So that's just kind of a caveat there. But at the end of the day, ask yourself, what is your traveler's need or needs that you're solving, and what is their current situation or context, and how can your brand help? At the end of the day, the most effective social media strategy is all about utility. It's all about providing value to your guests, whether it's setting their expectations up pre-stay or, again, amplifying the great experiences that guests are having during their stay, or reiterating great feedback that you received from that stay post-stay. So then you're able to incent and draw a new audience in by leveraging your guests' real feedback.
Yeah, right on. We have a ton of questions coming in from the audience. We'll continue on, but lots of great questions for you. So just continuing on that train of thought, let's look a little deeper into the kind of content that you should be sharing on social. For the most part, travelers use social to share their own personal experiences, which, as we already talked about, inspires their friends to travel and do the same, and it really brings the shopping journey full circle. And then as a business, you can leverage this UGC, or user-generated content, on your own social pages as well. And so forward-thinking hotels, and Greg, I know you have a lot of great examples, are developing their own contests or custom hashtags to use in social media to encourage their guests to share their stories. And then from there, the hotel can repost these stories with permission, of course, and I know, Greg, you're also going to talk about that, as well as engage with the guests. And the benefit of this UGC for your hotel is really threefold. First, you gain new content from guests that can be used to inspire others. Secondly, you get the access to a new and expanding audience because they share their posts with their followers. And then thirdly, travelers trust other travelers, as bizarre as this may seem, more than they trust brands. And so user-generated content is a way of demonstrating your authenticity and backing up your brand promise. And by sharing and reposting those stories from your guests, you're also demonstrating that you're actively monitoring your social media accounts. And when someone realizes that you're active and you're engaged, that is going to keep them engaged. So, really good to keep in mind. There's a hotel in Sydney, and it is the Hotel 57, and it's a really great example of a hotel excelling at user-generated content. What they did was they created this unique hashtag 57selfie, and they write it on the mirror of each room to encourage their guests to post selfies in their hotel room. It's really simple and unique, not to mention cost-effective at spreading the word about this boutique hotel, right? And it works for them because it fits within their persona and their style and their genre, right? An update like this can be shared 3 times on social media, which has the potential to reach like tens of thousands of people. So, lots of great ideas around this sort of thing, and here's just some pics of that. And I just think this is cute and quite clever.
Yeah, I love that. I love that example that you shared, Darlene. And I think what it also emphasizes is that you might be thinking on the call, all right, well, my hotel, we don't want necessarily to be having a selfie station in our hotel, or they might not be aligned with your brand positioning. That's okay. I think that there's other nuggets there that it's important to bring that example up about making sure from the get-go that your guests know what your presence is when they're on property, and making sure that you're very clear about sharing whatever your hashtag is, whatever your handle is. I'm particularly talking about Instagram here, and Twitter if you're leveraging Twitter, but the knowing that having your guests know what your hashtag is as a brand, as well as the handle, so they know how to tag your brand. As well as, quite frankly, even your geo tag on Instagram, making sure that they know to tag your venue location, the tag their photo at your venue location. Those are all very essential pieces in order for you to best benefit as a marketer and able to turn this user-generated content, identify the user-generated content, and then turn it into future posts for your brand. Because without telling your guests what your presence is. You run the risk of them creating their own hashtags and creating their own way of messaging their content. They may be posting about your property or restaurant while they're with you, but you as a marketer then will not be set up for success and be able to find that content. So it's really important just to remind them to use certain hashtags, and you can do that in a very fun way, like the 57 Hotel was able to do with, again, putting it on your mirrors, putting it in your rooms, on your TVs, on your Wi-Fi pages when you log into your hotel Wi-Fi. I mean, be very kind of upfront about it, because I think that that visibility of signage then really gives you more opportunity as a marketer. The example on the screen here also talks about taking a look at a multi-channel social media strategy, where if you're getting leveraging a lot of user-generated content from Instagram, you can then turn that content into content on your Facebook page as well. This example was a real-life screenshot example of a guest who had mentioned had mentioned our Kimpton and Boss Instagram handle in their post, but it also, if you look on the screen, it also tagged the location at Kimpton 90 Hotel. So we were able to find this content very easily by just doing a simple search on Instagram, and then being able to ask permission with a simple, very simple, straightforward, love the photo at Instagram user, mind if we reshare on our Facebook page with credit. And then once we were able to get the response, absolutely please share, we as a marketer, in order to make sure that we are covering our bases from permissions and legality standpoint, are able to just screenshot this and be able to store it away for future in case we ever have any pushback from the Instagram user about rights and permissions. And we were able to then in turn repost that on Facebook. Now, one caveat here is, of course, everyone's legal permissions and brand teams need to be they have slightly different policies, so I don't want to have a one kind of stop shop example for you on the call. If you're a marketer and you're like, well, what level of permissions do I need? It really does kind of vary slightly depending on what hotel company you work for or brand. But I do know that with Kimpton, this is aligned with our company policy, and then gives us the opportunity to repost a wonderful photo of Boston in the wintertime and give us another post to publish on Facebook.
Thanks, Greg. Kelly in the audience had asked, and I think you answered the question, how do you find the guest photos that they post on their page of your hotel? But I think you addressed that. So Kelly, hopefully that answers your question. Here's another question before we move on, because I don't think we're really going to talk about this much later, but how does social media strategy, how should that differ for an OTA when you compare strategy for an individual hotel or a brand? Any thoughts on that?
So social media strategy for an online travel agency versus hotel company?
Yeah, I'm thinking, how do you use your social media strategy? I think this is where the question's coming from. How do you use your social media strategy to ensure that the customer is engaging back with you, as opposed to going to an OTA and engaging about your hotel with them?
For sure. Well, and this is actually I'm glad we're bringing up this topic, because I know that a lot of the hoteliers on the phone, if there are any people from the online travel agency side, we love you as well. But I know that there's a lot of interest, continues to be a lot of interest when we talk about the flow through to the bottom line of hotel profits. How do you manage relationships with third parties like online travel agencies to drive bookings through those sites? But then how do you drive direct bookings? And for those people on the call that continue to have a challenge, maybe framing investing in social media to their ownership groups or to the decision makers at your property or hotel companies, it is important to think about social media and to remind those key stakeholders that it's a contributor to your direct booking strategy. By being able to be very active on these social platforms, it is, of course, benefiting your website performance. One piece of this that we're not maybe necessarily talking about in depth, but it's very important to remind people, is that it is okay to, on occasion, direct people as a call to action on Facebook or Instagram to your direct website if there's a relevant offer that relates to an image that's, again, genuine, authentic, and real on these social platforms. Because this, of course, at the end of the day, it is to build direct relationships with your guests, and ideally that your social media engagement will correlate to direct bookings rather than going to third parties. So it's all related. I just think that it's important to remind those that are decision makers when it comes to budgets and when it comes to investing in strategy that social media engagement is an integral part of your direct booking strategy.
Absolutely. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, of course. And I think this slide is good just to reinforce that question earlier about how to identify user-generated content. With this example, I'm only focusing on Facebook and Instagram, which on this webinar are the top two most engaged with platforms for the audience. And I will say from a property and regional level within Kimpton, these are the two biggest platforms that I spend the most time on with my day-to-day management of social media. And just wanted to have these examples. The example on the left is a search that's done natively within Instagram, Instagram.com, and you can go right into the desktop platform and be able to search for your hotel or your restaurant or property location by name. And these are photos that have been posted by either our brand or guests that have stayed at the property or been to the property and have tagged the location at Kimpton Onyx Hotel. So we're able to just give you a screenshot there. And on the right, it also is an example of doing a search for our hotel hashtag. Again, remembering that you need to communicate out to your guests what your hashtag is. What we do at Kimpton, one of the most obvious places is to communicate your hashtag on your website, your hotel website. So it's very obvious in our photo gallery on our website that we have share your hashtag hotel model of story, and it actually incorporates some of our social media into that photo gallery page, and I know Leonardo also can help with that. So that's definitely important to remember. But just know that it doesn't require any money. It requires doing native searches on Instagram, and you can do the same thing within Facebook Insights to identify guests that have have tagged themselves as checking into your property on Facebook. If they have publicly posted a Facebook photo, you can be able to see that content as well. So those are two other touch points that you can set up just simple searches and do a consistent audit of that content. And in addition to user-generated content, because that, of course, shouldn't be just the only cornerstone of your social media strategy, there's a lot of other kind of areas that you need to be touching on and incorporating into your overall strategy. The beautiful thing with user-generated content, which, again, in the context of this webinar, I'm most primarily talking about Instagram photos because they're most easily searchable and they show up wonderfully on Facebook as well because Facebook owns Instagram, and it's a great place to kind of develop some visual content to support then the editorial part of your social media strategy that needs to exist as well. Again, going back to my earlier point about be useful, be relevant, and provide information that your travelers want to know about your local area. So local tips, events, and insider behind-the-scene info is a great place to start if you're having a hard time with crafting an effective social media strategy for your property. Even those properties that may think, oh, well, I'm in a suburban area and there's not that much to do, there's still opportunity, because at the end of the day, think about it this way. Put yourself in the mind of a guest for a second, and you think about, okay, pretend the guest is not consulting on Yelp and doesn't know anything about your area. What are they going to do? They're going to go to your front desk team. What does your front desk team do when they say, well, where do I go for the best burger? Where do I go for a run around the property? Where do I go for the list can go on and on depending on where your property is, what your brand is about, and so forth. Coming up with that list, so working with your operations team to come up with that kind of hot list of your best local area kind of things to do, places to go, and then having your social media, particularly your Facebook page, act almost as a virtual concierge is a tremendous way to develop a social media strategy that's relevant, timely, and useful for your guests, because then it really, it lends credibility to your position online, and it's not just about you promoting your next offer or being overtly salesy. Other things beyond just acting as a virtual concierge, talking about timeliness of the time of the year. So when there's major holidays, both traditional and wacky. So it's like, you can do everything from, like, as a caffeine addict, this is maybe not so wacky, but National Coffee Day. If your hotel brand has something to do with coffee, if you serve coffee, that's an opportunity to post about National Coffee Day, because it's a trending topic that then gets more visibility and sets your property up for more likelihood to get more eyeballs, more attention, and more relevancy. Timely articles,
Greg, this is what I love about how your mind works. I mean, and why I think you're just so perfect for this topic is, and I think it's very helpful to our audience, because you always look through the eyes of your guests and bring it back to the style and the genre and, you know, who the property is. Be true to that, and then, you know, I think it will come naturally.
Well, and just to piggyback on that, Darlene, I think that when we framed up the conversation at the very beginning, where we've seen the evolution of social media and in turn seen the evolution of hoteliers' approaches to social media strategy and what their expectations are of not only what the return is going to be, but also what to just publish out there to their channels. I think that initially the idea, or it was such a, you know, talk about 2010, 2011, the challenges for social media were, okay, this is unknown and I don't know what to do or what to post. So it was almost thought of as this foreign entity, this foreign strategy that's going to kind of sit in a silo. And that is what I've seen time and again kind of happen with some hotels, where they just maybe become overwhelmed, because at the end of the day, there's a hotel to run, there's operational needs, there's the profit and loss statement to be looking after, and we need to be driving demand. But when we think about just all that busyness that's happening at your hotel property, it's the narrative is already there. Your guests are already telling you what they like and don't like about your property. The operations team is already providing valuable feedback to those guests. So it's really the job of the social media champion, because we're just going to call them a champion, that this position, this ownership of social media is done in so many different ways across so many different hotel companies that there seems to really not even be one particular role that's not necessarily carved out for this. But coming up with this strategy is not, you know, should not be that overwhelming, but it's just thinking about it, it's your point, in the eyes of the guest, and thinking about content that is already available at your fingertips, and not having to feel like you have to reinvent the wheel for what you post out there on Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah.
So I think that, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just going to tell Shelley and our audience, hang in there. She is wanting to know about ROI. We're going to talk about that in a second. But before we do, Kat from our audience, and I love your name, Kat, she wants to know, what do you suggest you post if you're in the full swings of renovations? It's a great question.
It's a great question. It is a great question. So, I mean, transparency is key, because to a certain extent, so there's like an asterisk here, right? Because at the end of the day, I like to think about hotels that are going under renovation. You know, a lot of the comments that you then have to endure during the renovation cycle will end up on those review sites like TripAdvisor, right? And so what do you think the best path forward is on TripAdvisor when you're responding to those travelers that are commenting about the current renovation cycle? You communicate out what the plan is for what the existing conditions are for your property, with again, leaning on your communications team if you have one, or as well as your operations team to provide a realistic time frame of when the renovation is happening, to what extent the guest experience may or may not be disrupted, but to be pretty straightforward, because when you go dark and when you do not communicate any of the details that are going on at your property within, say, a 3 or 6 month window, you do run the risk of then having traveler expectations be X and then they're Y, but in the negative way. So from a social media standpoint, though, there's some opportunities where hotels I've seen this happen, where you allocate some dollars to doing some fun things with social to show the transformation that's happening at your property in a way that then will excite your guests to actually start planning their trip after the renovation cycle. So if there's any collateral that's easy to put out there, that's a picture of a model room, the plans for what the hotel is going to look like after the guest rooms are done, to tease out and do maybe like a quick time-lapse video of some of the transformation that's going on, whether it's a room reno or a restaurant reno. I think that those are some ways to message the renovation in a really great way. But it is a difficult situation, because you don't want to be then overly transparent and almost then make your property seem like it's a less than enviable experience. So I do think engaging with your operations team as well to make sure to say, what are we going to do to overcome the disruption to the guest experience during this time, and trying to sprinkle in some of those sound bites in your social strategy, just to assure your travelers that you're still going to give them a great experience, even if there's some disruption to the experience you run on.
No, excellent advice, Greg. So we're going to go on to ROI. Before we do, I want to launch another poll, and we'd like to know, so what are your objectives with social media? Is it to increase awareness, to generate bookings, connect with travel shoppers, guests, or local businesses, or other? And if it's other, if you could just send us in the chat box and tell us what those other things might be. It would be, again, very helpful to us in framing the discussion today. So we'll give everyone a few more minutes to weigh in. It looks like the big winner here is generate bookings at about 85%, followed by increasing awareness at 66%, and then 50% is connecting with travel shoppers. So thanks, everybody. I'm going to close that poll, and we're going to continue on with our discussion. So despite all the great things we've talked about so far, the challenge that many people face is, how do you really demonstrate value from your social efforts, right? So, you know, getting likes and shares on Facebook is nice, but how does that really translate into revenue and bookings, the things that everyone cares about, and certainly management cares about? So posting a photo or a special offer on social media in isolation, and Greg referred to this before, from the rest of your business isn't really a good plan, right? Social strategies have to tie back to a bigger business objective. And when you do that, the entire program becomes much more effective and certainly stronger. It may seem obvious, but there are a lot of hotels out there that just post and share content with no real strategy behind it, other than, you know, they're just trying to win bookings because, you know, that's the buzz, right? And the strategy really needs to be more clear than that, understanding what you want to achieve, who the audience is, and then how to measure that success and think about it methodically. That really will help blow away those goals. These stats from Hootsuite outline the common reasons why businesses don't focus on social ROI. As you can see, the leading reason seems to be it's seemingly impossible to tie social media to business outcomes. But once you have that, it makes it much easier to determine what you need to measure. So, for example, if your goal is to increase customer interaction, then yeah, you measure things like likes, shares, comments, retweets, mentions, favorites, all that kind of stuff. And if your goal is to increase customer acquisition, then you look at URL clicks and traffic from your social media using, as an example, Google Analytics. We have we'll send to you, for those of you who are interested, you can download Hootsuite's comprehensive guide to social media. They have a whole white paper on it. It's really good, and I think it's quite helpful. Here's an example of a property that's been able to measure their social ROI, I think, pretty effectively. It's Secrets Playa Mujeres, and it's an adults-only beachside resort in Cancun. And between November 2014 and January 15, which is otherwise known as engagement season, and the Secrets launched their Love It, Book It, and Get It campaign, and they gave the first 50 couples who booked their weddings at the resort extra perks like fire dancers and fireworks and drone footage, photography, and more. And then the campaign actually included a Facebook component where participants could enter to win a dream wedding at the resort by selecting which special wedding day extra they would choose, with weekly prizes, and that helped keep the conversation going. And then they also had sponsored Facebook posts and display ads highlighting the resort's beauty shots, and that helped to drive traffic and contest participation. And I know this was a question from earlier in the audience. Someone was asking, how do you balance paid ads on Facebook? And Greg, I'm going to ask you this. How do you balance paid ads with organic?
Well, and actually, if we move to the next slide, I think that we'll speak to this a little bit. I just wanted to have that example up here, or at least from a Facebook advertising standpoint, and actually that's what we'll get to in a couple of slides. But I think we wouldn't even be able to cover the amount of kind of different advertising opportunities that are out there for Facebook these days. I will tell you very candidly, everyone that's on the call, the majority of the social media content strategy that we deploy, at least for Kimpton and Boston, is heavily organic, and there's not a lot of dollars that we allocate to boosted posts. But at the same time, Facebook has absolutely become a kind of pay-to-play space where the visibility and the reach that you might want, or say if you want to be able to more actively promote a certain special offer that is also being promoted across your email channels and your website, and you want to be able to amplify that reach across social, it's almost a necessity now to allocate some dollars to that through a boosted post on Facebook. Now, again, what is that dollar amount? Is there a precise science? The cop-out answer, but is the true answer, is that it varies depending on your budget. So it depends on everything from your average daily rate and the number of, it really, there's all these other kind of components to that decision, depending how small or big you have of a budget to spend. I just will share, though, again, that when it comes to Facebook encouraging brands and businesses to promote a post, they've become far more aggressive and active in encouraging brands to do so when you're seeing stronger than average organic reach. So when you do post a photo that is really resonating organically with your non-paid for audience, then you might actually want to consider investing $10, $20, $30 additionally on top of that to get more reach, because you're already getting an indicator that this is a really good post, that people are really enjoying this photo. And that is worth testing out, because you will then reach more of an audience when you do allocate a number of dollars to boosting your post. And you can do that, again, through a number of tactical ways. I think we could dedicate a whole additional webinar on about how to most effectively manage your social advertising, which I'm happy to also be a part of, Darlene, FYI, for later in the year. So.
Thank you. I know that that answered, I think, Jake's question in the audience, and so very helpful. I'm just going to go back a couple of slides, because the Playa Mujeres, and finally, one of the folks in our audience is actually from that brand. We totally didn't know that, and so thank you for joining us. That's fun. But what they ended up achieving was that they were able to secure these 500 entries with email addresses and nearly 34,000 Facebook impressions and engagement. They saw 20 new weddings that were booked within 12 weeks, and that generated more than $165,000 in new revenue. So for everyone, look at this hotel as an example of, this is a clear way to measure the impact of your social efforts. So all good. So Greg, we're going to go back to you, and I know you have some other examples of some success stories that you'd like to talk about.
Yeah, and again, these slides, this Facebook business success story was actually just a direct example pulled from Facebook business section, or in terms of advertising opportunities. And I'm not even really going to go through it in detail, other than just to call out to every hotelier that's on the call today that there are success stories in the travel and hotel space on both Facebook for Business section of their website, as well as, if we move to the next slide, there's also a great example of how to allocate dollars for Instagram business advertising success Now, granted, these both examples, Caesars and IHG as a brand, you might be thinking on the call, that's great, Greg, but these are brands with big budgets and a lot of dollars allocated, which is why I absolutely love the Playa Mujeres example, as well as I'll share one example that we're currently doing in market for Kimpton in Boston when it relates to Instagram, also wedding related, where we are spending about less than $1,000 over the first quarter or last quarter into this quarter on boosting a post that promotes our wedding package that we have seen already and have been able to directly attribute thanks to some tracking code that we've added in Google Analytics to this Instagram post of 20 new wedding leads that have been generated from this boosted post on Instagram. So it can be done with not these big budgets. You really can, if you find a visual that resonates with the offer that you're putting out there, and then some clever copy. This example that we have. I should have had this on the slide. Is an example of a custom food amenity that our chef does that's tailored. It's like a signature taste amenity that he will create for a couple. And so we have two wedding rings with a picture with a popcorn behind it saying, "Did you pop the question?" And so it's a little clever, and it relates to food, and it's cute, and it also is very real because it's popcorn that we give a lot of our guests. It's very popular. Long story short, it's done with little dollars and able to see a nice tangible return. So just for everyone that has smaller budgets out there, it can be done. And again, I think we could dedicate a whole other hour just to talk about advertising on social.
Yeah. Jennifer in the audience is offering something that they do at their hotel, and she's saying they created a Facebook rate code for special events, and then that way they can track the ROI by seeing those bookings. Excellent idea.
Love that idea, and actually that's something that at my last hotel we did we had a Travel Tuesday code that was set up when Travel Tuesday on Twitter and Facebook was more of a thing. It's definitely now more of a kind of, I guess, a legacy hashtag. It's been around for years now, but it was a social media promo code that every Tuesday we put out a special offer for just exclusively for social media followers and fans, and we were able to see some additional incremental revenue from that rate code. It's not going to be huge dollars, but it's another way that you can tangibly tie some direct dollars to some social media activities.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, it's in the slide. I mean, let's just recap everything that I was talking about. Again, Facebook and Instagram both, since they're the same company in a sense, have really ramped up their advertising and kind of for business sections of each of their platforms. And truthfully, there's been so many changes that have been made to both those advertising platforms in the last year. I don't think we have enough time to talk about it today, but I would just, as some homework and some I would highly encourage everyone that's on the call to go and start to explore, if you haven't, either of those sections, Facebook for Business and Instagram for Business, because there are case studies, examples galore of how even small businesses have been able to see a bigger return by allocating a certain amount of dollars to social, because at the end of the day, it's becoming more and more of a requisite, in addition to all the great things that Darlene, you and I have talked about in terms of harnessing UGC and the like. Yeah,
absolutely. Greg, I think this is worth teeing up. Shelley is asking, can you just touch on, we mentioned it just in passing, the tracking code in Google Analytics. She wants a clarification. Do you just mean just tracking the hashtag? Can you just give Shelley some examples of that?
Sure. And I mean, and again, depending on what analytics platform your hotel website is running on, I know that both Omniture and Google Analytics tend to be the kind of leading platforms that the variety of hotel companies leverage. What I'm talking about is setting up unique UTM parameters, which again, now we're going into kind of some technical Google Analytics geek speak. If you don't have that acumen and you have worked with an outside company at some point to build your website or have a digital team that is at your property or in your region or available at your disposal, they will understand what you're talking about. What I'm talking about is being able to directly attribute through click attribution the production from the traffic that is uniquely tied to a specific Facebook post, Instagram post, or Twitter post. And so that's different than being able just to see how many clicks a certain post got, because you're able to get some of those analytics and insights natively through either Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. You're able to see impressions and so forth coming from those platforms. What I'm talking about is being able to directly tie clicks to your website, and that requires some additional tracking code that it needs to be added on to those links and set up, and really does require a bit of digital expertise. It's not all that complicated, and actually, Darlene, I know that I use something. In Google AdWords, there's actually a link that you can go to right off the bat to be able to set that tracking code up, where you plug in your URL, you plug in your parameters, and you're able to then create those links yourself. So I know that maybe that might be something valuable to just share, a link to that, and then if people have follow-up questions, I'm happy to make myself available to answer those about how specifically to implement.
Great. Thanks, Greg. We have a couple more questions that we're going to take in a few minutes, but just a couple of words about Visly. It's a complete digital marketing solutions for hotels, and this allows you to create, publish, update, and maintain these visually stunning hotel websites, mobile sites, Facebook apps, and digital brochures for travel websites. And it helps you by centralizing all of your digital marketing in a single system, purpose-built for conversions to drive more bookings. And as many of our customers will tell you, it's super easy to learn, doesn't require technical skills or interaction with third-party digital agencies, etc. One component of Visly is the multimedia Facebook suite of apps, which take visitors on a visual tour of guest rooms, event spaces, and allows you to plug in special offers all within the Facebook platform. You can even turn your hotel's Facebook page into a booking channel because it integrates with your booking engine and allows your Facebook visitors to book a room without having to leave the website. So more than 4,000 hotels and accommodation providers around the globe are using this at the moment, and if you'd like to learn more about it, please visit us at the website. So I'm going to launch another poll, and we'd like to ask everybody, based on your experience today, will you attend another webinar with us? We sure would love to have you. You guys have been a great audience today with all your questions. It helps us, and I'm sure Greg would agree, really helps us understand what the burning questions are and what the challenges are, because at the end of the day, we really are here to help you in your digital marketing efforts, and today's event specifically focused on social, obviously. So thank you, everybody. 92% of you said for sure, so thank you. We really appreciate that. So we are, as I said up front, we're going to send you a thank you for joining us email with a link to the recording that you can share or listen to again. You're also going to get a link to SlideShare so you can download the deck as well. And we have lots of blogs around this topic. It's all on the resources section of our website. We have another webinar coming up next month, and we're going to be focusing on content marketing and how to use it to drive more bookings. So stay tuned for the details on that. Greg, a couple of questions. And this is, what do you think about Google Plus and Snapchat? Are these social channels that I should care about?
Yeah, well, I mean, let's start with Google Plus. It truthfully has kind of faded into the background quite a bit. The way that I like to look at Google Plus is actually doing a local search for your property and just seeing how it's displayed on Google with it used to be called Google Places. There was this merge of Google Plus and Google Local, and basically ended up being kind of building a singular profile for your property when you search for your property and seeing how it's detailed on that page. That, for most hoteliers, is where I just say invest in that and don't be as concerned about investing additional dollars or time, more particularly with keeping a robust Google Plus page live and ticking. So that's kind of that's at least my 2 cents on that. When it comes to Snapchat, though, which of course is all the rage and has been for the last year and plus, it feels like, in terms of investing resources at the property level, I would say that's still not advisable. And here's why: because the stories feature that is available to Snapchat is being really taken on by Instagram as well, where Instagram is creating an opportunity, is really encouraging its users to publish stories and to kind of create more instantaneous, real-time photos on its platform. And because Instagram has already now become the second largest social platform, it's really where I would encourage you to continue to invest your efforts. Stay focused on Facebook, stay focused on Instagram, continue to be a study of what's going on in the social space, and that is definitely what I do, where I'm looking at everything that's going on. I mean, Darlene, remember a couple of years ago we were talking about Vine, and it was like, I remember doing a blog post about how Vine is going to be the next thing for everyone, and then Instagram, what do? They create allow you to publish 15-second videos. So, pay attention to what the leaders in the social space are doing, because at the end of the day, for you to start chasing all the different platforms and to try to dedicate and to do it well, social media strategy on each of these platforms, it's an impossible task. And that's coming from a property level, area marketing manager whose full-time job is to handle social media strategy and it's a dedicated resource. It's just, you're going to drive yourself crazy and you might not necessarily see any return. Talking about return on investment for Snapchat, it's incredibly difficult to tie that.
Yeah. Hey, Greg, one more question, and
sure.
This comes from Brianna. She wants to know, what do you think about linking Instagram to my company's Facebook page so that every Instagram post is also posted on Facebook? Is that like a no-brainer, or should you not mix the two?
Not an exact science. It's interesting. And actually, we have an intern that I just tasked with trying to identify and do an audience audit for us to see how different within our capabilities our Facebook audience is with Instagram. Because the challenge here, right, is that if you do the kind of 2-in-1 approach of making sure your Instagram posts go right to your Facebook page, that in theory is like, okay, it's a time saver, but there's a couple of risks that you have with that. Number one, if you have some of the same audience and they're seeing the same content on both channels, then it might dim your effectiveness as far as being able to engage with them in a really genuine way. It becomes kind of this almost autopilot approach to social. The other piece of it that you have to have in mind is that the actual messaging and the way that you post on Instagram in terms of the actual words and what is advisable from a hashtag use and the style of your Instagram post might not manifest itself all that well on Facebook. For example, if you're including 3 to 5 hashtags in your Instagram post and then you're just auto-posting that to Facebook, it's the same thing that Darlene, you and I talk about when it comes to automatically sending your tweets to Facebook. It's a different way of messaging and crafting that story, and it might not gel from a look and feel perspective all that well on your Facebook page. So those are the caveats. The other thing is that if you have, say, more than one property, like my properties, we have 3 properties that have one regional Instagram account, but we have then individual property Facebook pages, so it might not work that well within you're having a regional Instagram account and then multiple Facebook pages. So those are my 2 cents. It depends, but I'd say, long story short, I wouldn't do it. I would actually natively post on each channel.
Well, your 2 cents are worth about $1, so thank you.
Okay. Inflation.
Well, thank you, audience. You've been terrific. Thank you, Greg Bodnar from the Kimpton Hotel in Boston, Mass. And you're always such a pleasure to have on our events for 2 reasons. I think you're entertaining and interesting and authentic, but also you have such terrific ideas and advice to give your fellow hoteliers. So thank you very much. We always appreciate it. Audience, thank you for your terrific interaction today. We have a zillion questions, many of which we didn't get to. We will address them in a follow-up blog after this event today. So thanks, everybody. This is Thursday, which I think is the new Friday. So have a great rest of your day or start of your weekend, whatever the case may be, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.